wisdom comes from accepting those moments as hard lessons, but those are lessons, not failures, right? Accepting the fact that you are really going through something that 99.9% of the population wouldn't even attempt to do.
Hey, welcome back for another episode of Founder Real Talk. I'm your host, Josh Broward, CEO of Wisdom Partners. And if you haven't joined us before, let me tell you about what we're doing here. Founder Real Talk really was born out of two things we hear from our clients all the time. One is, I'm lonely. And two is, I must be doing something wrong because this is really hard. And so we just want to try to kill two birds with one stone and say, man, everybody out there is struggling. All founders struggle. It's a hard journey, and build some community around the struggle and around the addictive nature that's just inherent in the startup culture, startup world. So today, without any further ado, I am thrilled to have as our guest, Edgar Munoz. So Edgar is a multi-time founder, still involved in some of the companies, but he's given most of his attention to modern development, which is a construction company based in Florida, and they are merging modern and traditional construction techniques. So think robotics, AI, and hammers and nails and drills, all of it together, building one property. So Edgar, can you tell us a little bit more about modern development? What problem are you guys really trying to solve?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, modern development, as you mentioned in our intro, we're looking to integrate modern methods of construction with some of the traditional. The gap that we really saw is that there is a want and a need for trying to scale operations and repeat types of designs and in different areas, but it's very limited, especially on the development scope side because of labor. It's very difficult to translate and reproduce that process in another region that has different skilled labor, that has different zoning requirements. So we're utilizing digital construction methodologies and robotics to try to solve that issue. So going from the design side, really looking at, if we design this single family home in Orlando, can we do the same type of design with zoning permits in Boston, right? Can we replicate and scale that? And so there's a lot of different stakeholders that exist within obviously the construction side. And so the reason why we took it as a developer is what we call a developer enablement type of model, where the developer is really the only stakeholder that has authority throughout the entire vertical, the entire ecosystem, right? As a GC, you go off of your experience as a builder, but if the bank or the developer owner wants you to build with gold toilets, you're going to build with gold toilets, right? And the same for manufacturers. You may have a great product that is going to help certain niches and certain things, but you can't tell the builder, well, you got to use my tool now, right? It just doesn't work that way. They already have their processes, they already have their supply chain built out. So it's the only place where, as a developer, we could take risk in the sense of just like any other developer takes a risk on looking at, hey, I want to develop this mixed use development, or I want to develop this single family home master plan community. But we are looking at creating the new processes. The example I always give is, 67 years ago, you kind of said it before, the hammer and nail, right? That was the way you had trades trained on how to put in drywall with nails. You had different ways of putting studs up with nails and hammers. And then all of a sudden a tool came out called, power tools, right? Where you can start drilling, right? And create efficiency, higher strength, but you're not going to take a drill and try to drill in a nail. That doesn't make sense, right? You get a screw. So we're kind of looking at the same approach, like, there are these new tools that are existing that have a lot of great efficiencies that can be built in, but we're not going to try to form them into a process that's archaic, that's not made for them. We're going to try to take advantage of those specs of those machines to design in a way that allows us to be as efficient or even more efficient, reduce costs in different areas, reduce our holding times. And then that way we can actually come up with a product that is higher quality, higher resiliency, but an arm and a leg to get it through the finish line.
Great. Why does this resonate with you specifically?
Yeah, I mean, great questions. My internal values, I've always wanted to help. I come as an immigrant, with my family here, and we had a lot of help growing up. Obviously, some issues like the housing crisis is not just domestically here, just in the United States. This is global, right, in all regions and in their different facets. And so, my passion for, I feel like a lot of founders has the passion of solving an issue that's so internally important to you that your drive and everything goes into that. So, I'd love to help create a methodology that allows for higher quality homes for really to become accessible, right? There's the mantra of affordable housing crisis and all that. And, I think there's issues of accessibility in every asset class, whether you're super wealthy or on the lower end of the income. There's still issues within those brackets of how things are being built, the quality of them, how long it takes, the complexities of it. I feel that utilizing digital construction and robots helps solve for a lot of those issues.
What's a win for you and modern development in the past year that you're really proud of?
Thank you. We started off within about a year ago, and we have already 5 projects coming up and becoming active. One of the first ones are being launched here in Austin with a very famous manufacturer in the space of 3D printing. We're actually signing the deal this week. We're looking at a large mixed development deal that we got equity and debt sponsors for, where we're doing 600 units. And so a very large scale project integrating robotics with some traditional tunnel form. So, and being able to just really go out there and get projects up and getting the financing has been a huge win for us this year. So we're very proud of that.
Great. Congrats.
Thank you.
We like to say here in Wisdom Partners that wisdom is failure redeemed. I think another way to think about it is often the most important lessons we learn the hard ways.
Absolutely.
So, what's a lesson you've learned the hard way? What's some wisdom you pulled out of the jaws of defeat?
Yeah, no, definitely. Great question. For me, what, helps me sleep at night in the sense of those failures, right, is the idea of failing forward, very, similar to your sentiment, right? These failures are really just lessons that were learned the hard way. That allows you to be better. I've had several of those, and they come in all types of sizes, right? It could be a big failure or just smaller daily failures that make you feel, am I doing the right thing? And it's really just, taking appreciation in those moments of, "Oh, okay, well, at least I know not to do that one thing again, right? It's like the Thomas Edison quote, right? It's, I didn't figure out 10,000 different ways to make a field on creating a light bulb. Is I figured out 10,000 ways not to work on the light bulb, right? So it's the same kind of concept of allowing yourself the grace. I think a lot of founders, especially myself, I found myself being hypercritical of striving for, oh, here's the results of these efforts. But those results are every day, having a team, having excitement on your project, having any type of progress is the fruit of those efforts, right? And yeah, the wisdom comes from accepting those moments as hard lessons, but those are lessons, not failures, right? Accepting the fact that you are really going through something that 99.9% of the population wouldn't even attempt to do, just out of fear, right? Alone. Of, oh, I need to have stability. I need to do this. I need to have these bills to pay. And when you actually step out of that comfort zone to try to achieve something that matters to you, you're already doing something that most people won't. And that's being courageous, right? So I believe that, allowing yourself grace is a big part of that. So, I'll give more context instead of the broader scheme of things. I have in the past tried to bring up projects when I was working in the consulting space of helping technologies. A lot of times I would take on some of that risk, as a consultant. Hey, I'll dedicate my time. I gave 1 year of my services without payment, only payment in stock, right? And I'm no longer working with that company. And some people might consider that, well, you got paid a whole year. You didn't get paid for a whole year of your services, and now you're not even working with them. Well, one, I still have the stock, right? So that doesn't really disappear. Two, I learned a lot actually from that experience is where I first saw my vision of how we're going to do this as developers, right? I was able to actually have the time and space to really dig deep and do market research and get actual primary source of evidence of, oh, wow, this is a gap that truly exists. And I think I could I'm a right fit for that. So it's just looking at those moments of, okay, yeah, I might have not taken particular pay for that for extended period of time. And now, okay, I'm not working with that group. And I could look at it as like, oh man, I should have just gotten paid for that time. But then there's been other aspects where I got paid for my time, and then that was used as a leverage point, right? Where it's like, oh, well, we paid you for that. You don't deserve more. And, putting yourself in that box. So there's lessons that you learn in both of those. I've had people that weren't honest, with how they are as humans, and I've lost money. I've lost thousands of dollars on just believing in someone that was going to do the right thing for us. And those were lessons learned. Oh, okay, I need to do more due diligence. Have more of opportunities to allow people to show themselves, because, there's times where you're like, I've had people screw me over and I've had a signed contract, and I've had people screw me over when I don't have a signed contract. At the end of the day, if they're going to screw you over, it's going to happen regardless, whether there's a contract or not, right? If someone's intention is not pure and they don't conduct themselves with integrity, things are going to happen regardless. And so it's just a matter of, what boundaries are you good with? Even if like you don't do that thing ever again, you at least know, hey, you gave your best effort and I was okay with the results of this because I truly put myself with my best foot forward. So those are just little lessons where again, it could be a really big thing where it's like, wow, like you didn't take payment for a year, to little things of like, oh, should I have talked a little bit longer to that person? Should I have asked a little bit more questions? Should I have waited and maybe do a smaller project with them, or smaller actions that prove what kind of a person I'm dealing with? So those are the kind of lessons that I've learned in my failures.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. How have you invested in yourself and your own leadership over the past year?
Yeah, definitely. Education is key, whether it's doing watching YouTube videos, as simple as that, to actually doing a meticulous course. I've found ways for myself to educate myself. I also am doing a advanced program in IT systems design online, and again on my own time. And it really shouldn't affect your day to days, right? Like you have your priorities that are set, but for you to become a good leader, you need to be knowledgeable and confident in the knowledge that you have, not really educated. I mean, I do believe that's important as well, but it's really having the knowledge, right? Taking the data that you're given, make it into information, right? So that you can make decisions, right? Those are kind of the steps in that knowledge seeking process. So, I looked at doing the advanced diploma. It's at Oxford University, to really improve my ability to understand the digital world and systems, and how, if we're looking to become a forefront in analyzing different types of digital construction methodologies, I would like to be confident that, okay, if I'm making these decisions, it makes sense. When I was in my drone company that I started first off when I was very young, I did a 6-month boot camp of full stack development with no intention to be a developer, programmer, but more of, we were doing programs with the Federal Aviation Administration, and I was the project lead. So I just felt like, okay, I need to have some understanding of what my programmers are going through, so that when I actually go through the interviews, I'm actually speaking what they're trying to communicate to me versus, I feel a lot of times the danger is overconfidence that kind of bleeds into arrogance, where it's like, okay, well, I have this vision and all that, but I think it's more of, a lot of people have that imposter syndrome, and
Hmm.
and I feel like the ones that are most successful and not really catering to that insecurity, more allowing yourself to grow that knowledge, right? Like, hey, okay, you may not know everything here, and it's okay not to know everything, right? It's impossible to know everything. But if there's certain areas that you feel like you can improve in yourself to make yourself that better communicator, that better leader, showing that you're open to growth, I think that's really what's important in creating that knowledge.
Yeah, what you just said reminds me of something my dad told me from his MBA program. They're doing a business finance class, and the professor said, "Look, we're not trying to make you an accountant. We're just trying to help you understand what the accountant is saying and see if tune your senses so you can tell if something's wrong."
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of education and institutions. That's what they're providing, right? Is those building blocks, and it's hard when you're, where the traditional path is, you go after high school, you're going into a 4-year college, and then you might go work a little bit and then go get your master's, right? But a lot of those programs, the best time for them is when you actually have some experience under your belt, so you can apply that knowledge instead of trying to memorize definitions. you actually can apply, wow, this is what this regression model means because I was doing that over here. Or, oh, okay, now I understand how I should do a data flow diagram because I have this issue of some inherent kind of bad communication between what I'm working on this project. I feel that that's really where that knowledge gets applied immediately. And it's just like anything in life, right? You got to relate to it. So when you're in the program with bare experience, sometimes it's just like, okay, I got to memorize this so I could get, to my midterm and get to the next one, finish my credit hours, and boom, I'm graduated. I can land that job. And
Hmm.
I wasn't really fit for that in the beginning. I had spent a lot of time just working, and that's why as soon as I was high school, I started my first business because I felt more like the need of learning through experience. And I don't recommend it for everyone. It's definitely tough, but if you're resilient enough and believe in yourself enough that you actually are putting the time in, not superficially, right? Like you really want to genuinely better yourself because you see, again, you're applying it to something that matters to you. You're applying to that problem you're looking to solve versus just, okay, I got to do this because I got to look good, And I think when you release that kind of mentality, you expand yourself more, right? You expand your capabilities. You put out there to the world, hey, like I'm actually open versus, oh, I'm just doing this so I have the document that says I know my stuff. Where really you just memorize a few different definitions, right?
Uh, what's the biggest challenge you're trying to solve right now, Edgar?
I think it's just a challenge of, okay, I'm not the challenge I'm looking to solve is within the real estate aspect of being able to do repeatable builds in different markets. But I believe the true challenge is being able to communicate across different stakeholders of the same message, right? Where you may be able to talk very technical to a robotic engineer on why, okay, it doesn't matter that you haven't tested that yet because we're testing that in this development, to your builder who is like, oh, okay, well, we're going to utilize this subcontractor for this robot because we're looking to replace this wall assembly so that you don't need 12 guys doing the framing, to the most important part, the money guys, right? Whether it's equity stakeholders in my business or equity stakeholders within the development, why you, right? Like when you're talking to an investor, they always ask like, why are you different, and what I've learned is when you clearly articulate, hey, this is the problem, this is our approach, here are the safeguards we have, this is how we say we're going to get to the market. When you clearly can articulate what your roadmap is and kind of the value chain, that's when money feels more comfortable, right? Because they're analyzing risk, right? And a lot of times most of that risk that they're analyzing is, can this team handle it? Can they actually do it? And so same thing with when you do a project, right? When you go, especially when you're starting as a new entity, right? There's stuff that you've done in the past, but who cares? You're a new entity. So, where's your track record now? And so that's been a lot of being able to show, hey, like this experience that I had within starting this startup or helping this startup go to this place, or the integration points. This is why I have an engineer that has this type of experience. This is why I brought on an architect that understands concrete and resiliency and things like that. You kind of you have to paint that picture, right? And so I think the challenge that I'm continuously looking to solve is being able to communicate correctly to the different stakeholders, because there are some challenges that I've had where I've said something, hey, this is our plan for the next quarter to my investor, and then I'm moving forward with that plan. He's like, why are you spending time on that? I was like, oh, well, that was in my report. He's like, well, and it may be different for different people, right? But in that certain scenario is I wasn't communicating the right way on, hey, this is how this is worked. I was saying too much, right? I needed to condense it more in that specific scenario. But so it's really understanding how to communicate with the different stakeholders is where I think my role is the challenge every day, right? Everyone has their own perspective and perception of the world. And so, it's actually pretty reasonable to think they're not really understanding what I'm saying. So I have to try to figure out, okay, this is what I mean by that. And then verify and like, you understand, tell me what you understand, right? And then that way, that once that communication is clear, I think that's where a lot of the hiccups happen on not getting projects going, or not allowing for the right kind of expectations to happen, right?
Great. Yeah, like matching the communication to the recipient is a real challenge because we're always thinking about what do I want to say, but
Right.
The hard thing, the sort of advanced communication is what do they need to hear and how do they need to hear it?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think that's kind of every founder's job, right? And when you're communicating your vision to all the different stakeholders that are helping you create that vision, you have to be able to, yeah, like half the time you feel like, oh, I've communicated right. And you haven't, and it's because you're thinking from your perspective, your interpretation of the world and how you process things. So I always recommend to founders, like, make sure that you clarify and that you give verification, right? And that's something again that I'm every single day, right, with every person I communicate with. And how should I say what we do, right? And it's may sound different to different individuals, but it's the same message along, right? You can pull out, okay, modern methods of construction, or hey, integrating tech and AI, or hey, like just trying to make your process easier and less waste. So there's different things that matter to different stakeholders that you have to recognize to be able to communicate with them.
Yeah. So here's a two-part question.
Okay.
How have you evolved as a leader up to now? You've been doing this for a while, so you've grown in many ways. Can you give us an example of how you've evolved? And then think ahead for the next couple of years. How do you still need to evolve?
Yeah. No, great question. The ladders I think about every day. So for the first part of your question, yeah, I've been in the startup world for about 12 years almost now. I think the biggest challenge for me is kind of what I touched upon before, was the imposter syndrome, which then resulted in insecurity in me saying that I don't belong here. And then if I believe that, then the world is going to believe that, right? And just giving myself grace and really appreciating the things that I have accomplished. And that took a long time. It was a lot of self work. But I think that looks different for a bunch of different people, right? It could be meditation helped you. It could be exercising. It could be eating right. It could be so many different things. But I think bottom line, a lot of founders I have found, they have that same challenge, right? How do I how do I know when it's enough that I've accomplished, And some of the answer could be it's never enough, but you could be okay with that. You could be okay with the fact that you're doing your best in every step of it, right? So, I think kind of my mantra for myself to really evolve that mentality is, I look at like the three P's, right? Positivity, perseverance, and patience. Like, allowing yourself to be positive, right? Like, some people actually are more cynical, and that's okay. Like, you could go through this angel and devil scenario on the shoulders, right? Where you're like, oh, okay, this could, and I think that's healthy for anybody, but it's really kind of looking at the positive side of it, even, as changing the nomenclature of failing to lessons. Like, hey, this was a lesson. Okay, now I know not to do that, versus why do I keep making that same freaking mistake, and then like putting yourself down, right? So it's even to that point, right? Persevere through everything, right? Like, I believe, and this is something my investor had told me. He was like, hey, what I see in you, or what I see in kind of all the exits that I've had in the startup world, is the common thread is resilience. A good leader is resilient. It doesn't matter if everyone's telling you no, you persevere through that. It doesn't matter if the market's like this or like that, or there's competitors. There's always a variable that exists, but are you resilient enough to go through those challenging times? Because that's really, again, kind of the common theme amongst all these successful entrepreneurs and successful exits is, you've heard the story, right? Musk sleeping in his office, Richard Branson, going door to door and trying to sell cassette tapes to start Virgin Records. I mean, you have these common stories of the garage startup, where it's like, everyone in those moments, they felt like they were surviving, but what they were doing is showing their resilience. That it doesn't matter if I'm not dealt with the right card. It doesn't matter if the environment changes, if I'm hit with COVID, you will always be resilient enough to follow through with what your vision is. So I think that again, the perseverance side, and then patience. Nothing goes as fast as you want until it's past you, right? It's that same old story of hurry up and wait. You're working, 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 and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now it's on them, and there's nothing you can do, right? Sometimes I joke with my team, is like, because they're excited and passionate about everything that's going on. They're like, have you heard anything? I'm like, sorry, I can't put a gun to their head and say, hey, sign this deal, right? Like, it's on their time now. You got to be patient and allow yourself that grace because everything takes way longer than expected, everything in life. And then again, until it passes you by. And then you're like, oh, whoa, what just happened? Like, how did 12 years already go by in my life? And not actually, appreciating those moments. So I think that's how I evolved, is just really allowing myself to be, feel the grace, appreciate myself, like be happy with the things I've done, and it's a lot of accomplishments, and it's from, again, from a place of being genuine, right? Not superficial, like, oh, I'm awesome, like looking yourself in the mirror, like you're the guy, you're going to close the deal today. I think that's all superficial, in my opinion, right? If that helps you, great, but for me, it's just really truly looking at myself and being like, wow, like that's been challenging. You came from really nothing, and you've had to work twice as hard, three times as hard as everyone else, wake up earlier, not because that's what someone else told you to do. That was because you did it for yourself, because you believed in that project. So, I think that's, if I look now to your second part of the question, like the next few years, what do I need to evolve in? I think that's a principle that you can always evolve, right? Evolved on being truly happy in your place and being present, I think is the biggest gift you could give yourself. A lot of times you're either lost with the future or dwelling on the past, right? And then you miss the now. So I think if you become more present of the things that you're doing every day, and like, I think that matters with the relationships you hold too, right? So if you have relationships that, you know, don't allow for that, don't allow for you to actually appreciate it or sit with it. Like my team members all the time are like, oh man, I'm so proud of you. And I say the same thing to them, right? Out of being genuine, not just because we want to, make someone feel good about themselves. It's like, wow, like recognize this. Like this is cool. What you've just done. And sharing that amongst your relationship, I believe that's really, really important. Having that safe foundation. So, I think I'm always going to keep evolving in that aspect, evolving as myself. Really, I think what's important for me to accomplish things, I need to have that passion and drive and feel it. So always checking in with myself. Am I happy with what I'm doing? Is this the right place? Is this right for me? I think a lot of people are so scared of change, right? That they're like, oh, well, maybe I could stay a little bit longer, or I don't know, I'm doing well. Like, why would I go this way? But then it goes to the point where it's like almost too late, where you're in it for years and then you didn't allow yourself. I see that a lot of from individuals that come from corporate, that have worked for me or I've worked with. A lot of times they like, oh, I always wanted to start something, but I was too scared. And then it was like 10 years passed by, 15 years passed by, and you're in the same area, the same level that, you were 10, 15 years ago. And then you start regretting, well, I should have done that earlier. I wish I would have done that earlier. Well, it's never too late. People always say that, right? You see the stories of the 80-year-old guy going to college, or, someone starting, was it Colonel Sanders starting, KFC when he was in the 60s? It's just like, it's never too late to really follow your passion, right? You just got to allow yourself to do that. So I think that's also a place where I'm always going to keep evolving, is like, am I happy in my situation? Can I give my best self in this point?
Edgar, thanks so much for being with us on the podcast today. I really value your insights, the honesty about giving ourselves grace and being in the present moment. I think that's really critical.
Right.
So, if for folks who are out there listening, we'll have Edgar's LinkedIn in the show notes, and you can reach out to him if you want to find out more about modern development or hear more of his tips on how to stay in the present moment. So that's all for
Thank you very
today,
much.
everybody. Thanks.
Appreciate you, Josh. Look.